Hello, my name is Dave, and this is my story. My journey with mental illness began in my childhood. So early I can't even remember when it started, it's just always been there. From early on, my fear of people, sociophobia, and fear of women, gynophobia, were always present. These were in part responsible for my early moving around of children's homes. Putting someone with sociophobia into a home with 50 others tends to lead to problems. In my childhood, when I was adopted, my adoptive mother tried to give me a hug, and I tried to push her away, and sadly in the process broke her nose. Over the years, these incidents got significantly worse, to the point where being in a room with even family members, close friends, was a significant challenge for me. It was around turning 12 that things took a turn for the worse. It was then that I started to suffer from what back then was called multiple personality disorder. This came about because I was frequently in situations that I couldn't handle but had to deal with. For example, school, work, cadets. I would mentally withdraw and create a personality that could handle that specific situation. The issue was different situations required different approaches, and by the time I was 16 I had a total of 15 distinct personalities, including my original one. This led to significant noise in my mind where every personality would be vying for control over both the situation and my body. Things got so bad that I honestly didn't know who I really was. Even now, years later, I still at times worry over whether the Dave Taylor that I am now is the real me, or am I just another personality that was constructed and the real me is buried under all the trauma and unable to come out. As I withdrew more and more from reality and dove further and further into fantasy realms, another issue arose that does still have a very heavy influence over me today. That has been unable to separate fiction from reality. What I mean here is both simple and complex. As kids, most of us, if not all, had invisible friends. Now imagine that on a global scale where everything around the world is invisible friend level. For me, this took the shape of the books I was reading. For example, I would be reading Lord of the Rings, and when I put the book down, the story carried on. My imagination was so far into the fantasy that I was mentally constructing what I was reading into the real world. So I'd be looking at the world, but seeing Lord of the Rings. Instead of people, I'd be seeing hobbits, elves, dwarves, orcs, and yes, some humans as well. That was the world I was living in, which, as you can imagine, compounded with the MPD, as I would start a new novel, create a new world, and find the old personalities didn't work, so I'd make new ones. All of this was being done subconsciously. It was then that I went to Scientology, who, despite their best efforts, couldn't break me. However, they did teach me to completely isolate myself from my emotions, something I have been doing since childhood subconsciously, but they helped me perfect it and to do it consciously. By the time I left Scientology, saying I was a robot would be an understatement. I had completely locked up all of my emotions and kept them buried deep down. I went through a few other religions over the years. A few of the ones I remember are Druidism, Crowleyism, Wicca, witch school, pagan, finally ending up in Buddhism. I won't go into the details, they aren't too relevant. As time went by, I withdrew further and further from reality and sunk further and further into the fantasy worlds I created. And what followed was several years of me wandering around the world, sinking further and further into fate worlds, unable to settle down for more than 6 months to maybe a year. When I finally arrived in Taunton, I was completely broken, waiting for death, suffering from severe depression on almost a daily basis, trying to commit suicide. I actually succeeded dying on several occasions and had to be resuscitated. I know this has been a rather long description, but I wanted you to know just how badly broken I was when I joined Living Light Church. I came to Living the Light despite my fear of people, and if I'm honest, a blatant hatred of the church institution. I still get a chuckle of the first day I went there, despite being warned beforehand of my fear of people and not to point me out as a visitor. Someone stood at the front and shouted, "Hi, Dave's friend Dave!" Naturally I fled, but I kept coming back over the weeks and months to follow. It was the first church retreat where I felt the healing power of God. Throughout my time with the Living Light, the buzz of voices from all the personalities was constantly present, as was the problem of the fantasy world overwriting the real world. And of course, my phobias were still running rampant. So this church weekend away was, for me, a living hell. When I got there, I was given a room with a small bunk bed. Now, I'm a big bloke in all dimensions, over 6 foot, and back then I was 28 stone. It was horrible. I needed a crowbar and half a dozen burly guys to get me in and out of the bed. Very early in the Saturday morning, after a few hours of tossing and turning, I gave up. I decided I'd had enough and I was going to walk home. I got halfway up the drive with me arguing with God about me going home, to which he said I wasn't, and as he had things for me to see and do over the weekend. I refused and started to leaving, to which God got physical, knocked me flat on the ground and told me no. So I went back to my room, rather disgruntled, but it was later that same morning some people from the church prayed for me, and the constant drumming of the personalities went silent. For the first time in many years, I was alone in my own head. It was both thrilling and terrifying. It was also at that retreat that I was able to give and receive a hug from others, and even from a woman, something I'd not been able to do before. Sure, it wasn't the easiest of things, but I was able to do it. In the following years, God worked major miracles in my life. I was constantly up and down with depression, and the lows were Grand Canyon depths of low. These would last for months at a time, and the climb back was arduous and painful. These days, thanks to God's healing, my depression is all but gone. Those canyon falls, no more than stumbles now. I recently had a major setback, which would previously have sent me on a several-month downward spiral. This had me down for a day at the most, and even then I was still functioning. What's more, due to my mental health, it was impossible for me to work. I had been long-term disabled, and everyone, including myself, had given up on me ever being able to work again. God has now done such a miracle in my life that I'm now working pretty much full-time. I'm running my own business, having several clients and meeting new people almost on a weekly basis. All of this would have been impossible when I first joined the church. It would have been impossible without the grace and healing of God. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new." Some of my healing has been instant, but a lot of it has been a slow change over years. The shadows of our past can and do still shackle us. It's only through the grace of God can we break those shackles. That can take time, but the key is never to stop moving forward. When you turn to Christ and accept Him as your Lord, you really do become a new creation. I won't say that things are easy now, because they aren't. Honestly, it's a constant battle, with many times that I've fallen over. Even at those times, putting faith in God and asking for help has led me to recover quicker and more completely than any time I've tried before. Do I still have depression and anxiety? Yes, I do. But I no longer stress over it. Previously, even on my good days, I was always cautious and worried in case it turned into a bad day. Paranoia was rampant and controlling. These days, however, I just go about things as normal and let God be my guide. I hand my days over to God and give thanks for His grace that has given me this good day. On bad days, I turn it to God and ask for His grace to get me through the day. I pick up the Psalms and read them to listen to them, or on Spotify, Shane and Shane have 2 albums of Psalms. I highly recommend them. Miraculously, my bad days turn into good ones. So that's been my journey to today. It's an ongoing journey, and every day I see God healing something else in me. Things I struggled with previously suddenly have become much easier. I'm thankful that I was able to turn to Christ. Without Him, I would have died long ago due to my suicide attempts. He took a broken man full of hate and despair and turned him into a whole new person full of joy, love and hope. If you're watching this and have similar battles, I pray for the grace of Christ to work a miracle in your life and to show you how you can become a new creation full of joy, hope and love.